we'll go through step by step chronologically things that have happened over the last 3 years. And over here to my left, we have Susan Smith. She's a Minneapolis attorney, Susan Shogan Smith. Susan has been active in the Republican Party for several years. Susan is well versed in the Minnesota Constitution and also state statutes that govern elections in Minnesota. Susan has been active in election integrity to make sure Minnesota elections are fair and honest. She's also been fighting the fight to make sure that the MNGOP be in compliance so that they do not lose major party status. Susan loves her country and her state. And off to her left, and she's the infamous SSS. I don't want to use the other word. And over to her right, my left, is Brett Bussman. Brett has been active in the Republican Party for several years. He is the current chair of the Republican Party in Todd County. He is also currently on the Minnesota Personal Committee and assists with HR. In 2022, Brett was the endorsed state Senate candidate for SD 5. Last year, he was a candidate for MNGOP, for the MNGOP chair. He is currently running for CD7 chair in hopes of cleaning up the corruption and uniting the Republican Party. Brett has served our nation, being a 20-year veteran of the U.S. Army. Brett is a true patriot who loves his country and this state. So as we go through the list of abuses, we'll be asking them questions, how these things are nefarious, the legalities of them and stuff like that, because they're very knowledgeable in what should and what cannot be done. My wife and I just started to get involved with politics more deeply in 2020, 21 maybe, something like that. We started doing, along with Eric Hansen, Caravan of Patriots, we started doing caravans for Trump. And then we started getting involved locally in politics. And because Donald Trump talked about draining the swamp, and as we've seen in the national level, he didn't mean Democrats. The swamp is both parties. And so we got involved in our local Republican Party, and we seen it in our own backyard. Thought, what is going on here? So we ran as delegates. So on February 1st, in 2022, people all across Minnesota went out to their caucuses to get involved. But at that point, we became delegates, and then in February, everybody who wanted to be a caucus delegate needed to sign up or be elected by their precincts. So those who got elected by their precincts should go on to the county. And then what we found out, between February 1st and February 25th, there was a 3.5 week gap there before they released the caucus delegates. And on that list, we had noticed that several names had been added. There's 92 precincts in Otter Tail County. And we were able to see 30 of those precincts. And out of those 30 precincts, 32 names were added. So what I want to ask these people over here is, why is it important to become a delegate, first of all? And what does that do is that legal? And what do they do when they add these delegates? How does that affect our system?
So just real quick, I think I want to tell you, so my belief about the precinct caucus system, a lot of people say it's unimportant. It's actually the foundation of our entire political system. That if any of you have ever built a building, do you build a building on a solid foundation or on a rocky foundation? Right? It's got to be solid, right? Precinct caucuses are where Americans go in only a few states now, because they've effectively been eliminating them around the country, right? Because they don't want the people to participate. But we in Minnesota still have the right to participate and form that foundation. And the foundation is of the Republican Party of Minnesota, which is, in essence, one of two major parties. I mean, it is legally now, because the Republican Party of Minnesota is not a fraternal organization. It is not a nonprofit. It is not a private organization. It really is functionally a quasi-government organization that forms the foundation of everything in your life. Because there is not a single thing in your life not affected by politics. And if you can think of something not affected by politics, please let me know. There's nothing. It's like Greek, and Greek is like in My Big Fat Wedding when the dad says every word is Greek, right? Yeah. Same deal, politics. So when you don't go to caucus, and you don't speak and people don't go to caucus, that leaves a gap. The people in that area are not represented. We'd like everybody to show up, but we know people don't. But when you go, you become a person who can hold our party accountable through a chain of events, right? And there's specific Minnesota statutes that we can get into. They are elections. Precinct caucus is elections. It's under election law. There's a body of law. And by the way, I should say this. I'm not here as an attorney. You know, the Democrats called me a bamboozler, okay? I'm not here as an attorney. Every one of you can read the law. Our law is written in plain language. There's something called the canons of construction. Any person who can read at a 4th or 5th grade level should be able to read our statutes and interpret them. We don't need to be an attorney. Don't let anybody convince you you're not smart enough to understand what a law says, okay? You can understand and you should understand. You don't need attorneys. In fact, attorneys mess it all up, to be honest with you, because they try and change the meaning of everything and convince you that, oh no, it could mean all these other things that it doesn't mean. So you gotta go to the caucus if you really want to make a difference. And those results have to be elected, have to be respected. And we know the law, there's no ambiguity in the precinct caucus language. You go, you get nominated at the caucus. Nobody can get added in after the fact. If nobody goes to the caucus and it's blank, they don't have the right afterwards to add people in. You have to be nominated by an attendee at the caucus. That's how it works. And if it doesn't work that way, then it's totally irrelevant.
So as I was saying, it took them 3.5 weeks to release the delegate list, and then between February 25th and March 19th is when we had our convention. So in that 3-week window, finding those discrepancies, we, one of our fellow patriots went to the microphone at the convention and asked about these discrepancies. Well, after we talked, we removed 1 or 2 of the delegates. Don't remember exactly how many were removed. Well, then one of the guys that are on the leadership of the BPOU, that's the Otter Tail County Republican Party, he went to the microphone and he made a motion to end all discussion on it. So we took a vote amongst the body there, but in order to do so, they needed 2/3. Well, they had about 60% to our 40%, so they didn't have the amount of people to stop discussion on it. So I think we maybe removed another person, and then he went to the microphone again, and he made a motion to accept the preliminary credentials. That's the list of delegates. So then we had to vote on it, and they had enough people because they only needed a majority, and so they accepted those list of delegates at the convention. So, so then right after our convention, about 9 days later, we had a BPOU meeting in Otter Tail, and we were requesting that they do an independent audit. Well, they refused to do an independent audit, and that was their last open BPOU meeting. Ever since then, they've all been closed. Now end of this last summer, they did have a Zoom meeting, but for the last 2.5 or last 3 years now, they've not had one open public meeting where you could attend in purpose. They disenfranchised anybody that had a different view than them.
Merle, I do want to make a comment. This is an important point.
Yeah.
Because David Hand was elected to be the chair of the Republican Party of Minnesota in October of 2021. And in February of 2022, he took the executive board, the state executive board of the Republican Party of Minnesota into executive session, where it remains today. Alex has started letting people attend meetings when there's nothing personnel related. But this happened after David Hand became the chair, and that was the start of it. This isn't the only place that's happening. They've literally taken those meetings into executive session, which is unprecedented, so.
Is it legal to add delegates and alternates after caucus night and by people from outside that precinct? And if not, why is it illegal?
So there's a statute that we just mentioned. We kind of already went over this, but the statute requires people to be nominated by their own caucus. So even those forms they had where, do you all remember they had forms that people could fill out, like these emergency forms? If you couldn't go, you could submit it, right? Those are not requirements that people be considered delegates and alternates. Those are people saying, I can't be there, but I would like to be a delegate or alternate. That has to go to the precinct caucus directly. And then the attendees at that caucus, someone in that group has to place that name into nomination. And if they don't, that person is not they can't be a delegate. And that did happen in Otter Tail. Vance Bachman's precinct he didn't go, and he was not placed in the nomination. So he should not be a delegate. That's just how it works.
So then on April 23rd, this is another month later, they had an endorsing convention in Fergus Falls. And at this endorsing convention, they were going to try and rectify the problem, they said. So what they did is they created a sham show. There was no audit done on who was added and who wasn't added, although we knew at least of 32, and that was only looking at about a third of our precincts. So multiply that by 3, there could have been up to 100 names added, we don't know. So what they did is they invited one of their state executive members to come up here, and they said this: if you have any discrepancies in your precinct, you can go meet out in the hall and talk to her. But you can only speak of your precinct. So in other words, if I'm in the city of Perm precinct, but I see over here on Dead Lake precinct that there wasn't anybody there, or there was 2 people there, and now all of a sudden they have 6 delegates, I know there was some names added. But I am not allowed to speak on it, only those people. So if they were illegally added, they're probably not going to fess up and say they were. So that was kind of a sham show. That was on April 23rd. On October 19th, I was on Facebook, and I wanted some clarity because there was a lot of confusion when I'd ask people on the other side about this adding of the delegates. Some people would say it didn't happen, and others would say, well, it's okay, they can do that. So I wanted clarity of that. So I asked the current chair on Facebook, I said, I made it simple for him. I said, is it A or B? Were no names added, or are you saying names were added, but it's okay to do so? Well, you can see his answer on the very bottom on the left of the screen there. It's legal to do so as long as there's spots. That's a lie. You can't add delegates. Only people in their precinct are able to add delegates, and only on caucus night. Now, if you're going to want to get elected by proxy, somebody from your and you're not there, you're absent, somebody from your precinct can nominate you and they can vote you in, but you can't just add delegates outside of your precinct and after caucus night. He also states on there, this is not an election. Is that on there at all? On the right, yeah. Caucus is not election night, which they've already shown that it was. It's a vetting process. So in other words, they want to sit back in their ivory towers after caucus night and say, okay, I want you in, you can't come in, you can come in, but you can't come in. That's kind of how they want to do it. They want to pick who gets to be delegates and who doesn't get to be delegates. So I think you've already addressed that aspect of it as far as it being illegal. Yeah, let's ask that. Is caucus an election, and is it a vetting process?
So it's very simple. There is a body of election law. It's under Chapter 200, and it goes. They literally describe it in statute. But so sections 200 to 212 create the body of election law, right? And when you go through these laws, there are different provisions that address different types of elections. So, for example, there are special election laws, there are caucus laws, there are general election laws, there are school board election laws, but the 202A, as we showed earlier, it very clearly calls them elections. There's not any question that they're called elections. There have to be a secret ballot. It's got to be voted in secret. You have to vote by ballot. And that's important for you guys to know, just so you know. These are actually election materials. We're very lazy about this now. You guys should be having paper ballots at your caucuses, and they should be keeping those records. They should be keeping the little things in a little Ziploc bag in an envelope, because we have had people come back and say they cheated, just like what happened here in 2022. And it wasn't just Otter Tail, if you don't know that, right? There were many places across the state, and they will say, well, it's been going on for years. It doesn't matter, right? A lot of bad things go on for years. It's just not an excuse, right? So we need to fix it, and we need to come back into compliance and do the right thing.
I'm going to add something to that. So Minnesota GOP Constitution, Article 9, basic political organizational unit conventions. I know it's conventions, but hold on. BPO convention shall be composed of the following residents of the BPOU. Delegates elected at the precinct caucus. That's no ambiguity there, right? It says elected right there.
Elected at.
Elected at the precinct caucuses. So, that's in the Constitution.
I kind of skipped over this, but why were the delegates and alternates added? Well, the reason is twofold. One is because they had a candidate they wanted to get elected. He was our current representative. His name was Jordan Rasmussen, and he was now running for the vacant seat, SD9, as a senator. And the way they did this is adding all these delegates, he could then get the endorsement because they had more delegates than the other guy. And Nathan Miller had ran, but he didn't decide to run until the middle of March. So all this was done prior to him, but they like to say, oh, Nathan Miller, we all have sour grapes because he didn't win. But this was actually intended to defeat Tory Western, who, when the redistricting happened, their district was mixed with ours, so him and Jordan Rasmussen were both going to run for the same Senate seat. Well, Jordan Rasmussen essentially went to Tory Western and said, look, I've got all the delegates in Otter Tail County. SD9 is made up of Otter Tail County. It's got Grant, Traverse, Wilkin, and a portion of Douglas County. But Otter Tail is by far the biggest. So if you get the Otter Tail County delegates, you're more than likely going to win that seat. So he said, you may as well pack up your bags and leave town because I've got all the delegates. How did he know he had all the delegates? Because they added several delegates in order for him to make sure that he got the endorsement. So I kind of forgot that. That was an early stage. But then, so several of us then could not vote for somebody who lies, cheats, and steals, who's corrupt. So we said, what are we going to do? So after the primary, Nathan Miller ran against him in a primary. And the vote was very close. It was, I think, 350 votes different out of 11,000 votes. So then Nathan gave them the option, look, if you'll do an audit on the delegate list, who was added and who wasn't, and then he would step back and he wouldn't run a write-in. But they refused this audit because they don't like sunlight. Remember we talked about sunlight being the disinfectant? They didn't want that. So Nathan went ahead and he ran as a write-in. So several of us supported him in his write-in campaign not because we had ideological differences necessarily with him, but because of the corruption. So we supported him when he ran for a Senate seat. Then on January 10th, 2023, what they did is the BPOU meeting, the executive committee had a meeting and they voted on removing 33 people from being able to attend the upcoming convention. And that vote was, 22 to 2, and 2 people abstained. And then we got a letter on February 3rd, 8 days before the convention, several of us who got suspended. And by suspending us, we went to the convention and we went to Thumper Pond, and they would not let us register, they would not let us get in, and they refused to let us speak, to defend ourselves, nothing. We were just suspended. So my question for you guys, is it legal to suspend or cancel duly elected delegates who got elected at their precincts?
So it's really important that everybody understand this. Precinct caucus delegates are elected by Minnesota statute. They're not elected at a BPOU caucus. So the caucuses that you get invited to are actually the caucuses of the Republican Party of Minnesota. Only major parties are allowed to hold. Well, anybody can have a caucus, but they're statutorily required to hold caucus if you're a major party. The Democrats, Republicans agree on the process and the date, and because it's foundational. And the people elected are elected. There is no mechanism in any way. In fact, the MNGOP Constitution is clear that there is nothing in the MNGOP Constitution that can interfere with the right of any person to engage in a caucus, a convention, that they are entitled to participate in. So this is a fundamental fact of once you're elected, so if you represent precinct A, whatever, you represent all of the people that live in your precinct. You have been elected. And only the elective body, anyways, even if you were to go Robert's rules, it's the elective body that can remove those people. They're statutory. There's nothing that allows their removal. That doesn't mean that any one of those people has the right to go to their BPOU convention and get elected to be a state central delegate or a state convention delegate. Those people can be removed of that power because it's not a right. But once you're elected at the precinct caucus, there is no way to remove you. No executive committee, no state executive committee, no CD. They cannot remove you as a precinct caucus delegate. You serve for 2 years. And in fact, both Otter Tail and the MNGOP have adopted language that is in, and Rich, you have it in image, a screen capture, that very clearly says challenges to a delegate, a person who wants to participate in caucus, those challenges can only be brought at the caucus, right? Yeah, at the caucus in the precinct. There's no such thing as a location convener. Caucuses are by precinct, period. Every precinct runs its own caucus. There's no caucus location per se. There's just a place where people get together. But it's very clear that if I'm going to challenge you or you to be a delegate, that has to happen at your caucus, your precinct caucus. If the precinct caucus people agree to elect you to be a delegate, they've automatically said you are a delegate. And unless you move out of the district or die, they can't remove you. Because that challenge to your status had to occur at the actual precinct caucus. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And it's in both bylaws of both the Republican Party and Otter Tail.
So that brings us up to last year. So on February 27th of 2024, again, we attended caucus. Now, people were telling us, how do we fix this? Well, what you need to do is you need to get people to come out to caucus. You need to go recruit like-minded patriots to come to caucus. So what did we do? We recruited people. We had a whole bunch of people come to caucus. But they knew this was going to happen, so what did they do? They pre-planned chaos and confusion. What they did at last year's caucus is normally there's 7 convening sites. In 2022, there was down to 5. They had them in Pelican, Fergus Falls, Perm, Battle Lake, Henning, New York Mills. Am I missing one? Parker's Prairie. So they had 7 of them, but they condensed it last year down to only 2. Why did they do that? Chaos and confusion. So Tommy Miracle ran the one in Perm, and the one in Fergus Falls was ran by his son, Harry Miracle. How convenient. That way they could control it. Well, at the Perm caucus location, what we did there is somebody made a motion to remove the temporary location convener. I know we don't like that word, but they remove him, and he resisted. But there was a lawyer in attendance, and he said, look, if you don't allow for somebody to nominate a permanent convener, you're breaking state statute. So he threw his arms up in the air and said, okay, we'll have a vote. So they nominated Tammy Berry to be a convener, and then Tommy was appointed by the BPOU, so there was a vote taken. The vote was 183 to 39 for Tammy Berry to remove Tommy Miracle. Now they attempted to do so in Fergus Falls, but Harry refused to allow it to take place, breaking state statute. Coincidentally, a couple days later, he resigned from the BPOU. I don't know why, but that's what happened. So, my question to you guys is this. Why do you suppose they had 2 locations and the registration forms? You guys want to talk about the registration forms and the withholding of the PCR forms?
So this is a map of Otter Tail. By the way, this didn't happen, what I'm going to talk about didn't only happen in Otter Tail, okay? It happened, they moved things around. So this is Otter Tail, okay? You see these red X's? These red X's are caucus locations that had been caucus locations in the past. There were 7 of them. They went from 7 down to 5 in 2022. But a lot of people only go to caucus in presidential years. It's a bigger deal. People show up, they get more excited, there's a lot going on, whatever. And so the blue is where nobody went to caucus at all. Not one person went to caucus, okay? So you notice that the blue is connected probably to where they're closer to X's for the most part, most of them. So none of those precincts can have anybody allocated to them at all. The squares are where there were caucus locations, so Fergus Falls and Perham, and we believe this is the divider. The red line is the divider of who went to Fergus this way, who went to Perham that way. Does that make sense? So the only question we had is up there with Scambler, but nobody went, but they probably went to Pelican Rapids in the past. So the green are all the precincts in Otter Tail that we know are certified, because this is a book that I created with affidavits. See this? Okay, so this is a book, green certified, yellow, people haven't responded, they may be certified, we don't know. These red people are people say we're not certifying, we're not giving you documents. So this is this right here, okay, in terms of certification. So another thing to know is that these people here had a form, the Otter Tail County form, that said that you had to certify, they use the word certify, which in legal terms means something. Certifying something is, that's a big deal. It's almost like you're committing perjury, okay? So they use the word certify. These people down here mostly had a form, this form, which I printed out and brought today, in blue, this in blue. And this form says, please sign here to signify you're in general agreement with the principles of the MNGOP. That's this form, okay? This is the form that they used in Fergus, for the most part, right here. So now if you want to go to the forms, back the one that you had before. So this right here is the form that, so the reports are, I wasn't there, I didn't hear the conversation, okay? Maybe some of you did. But when Tommy Miracle and Tammy were having their argument about the forms and stuff, Anna Matthews reportedly directed Tammy that she had to use the OTC form. Okay? Now the OTC form, it's all one BPOU, right? If one people had to use it, shouldn't all people have to use it? Right? But for some reason, on the other side, they didn't have this issue. They used the MNGOP form. But how many of you have heard the Wayback Machine? Have any of you heard of the Wayback Machine? If you don't know what that is, you should know what it is. Anybody can go online and save a website to the Wayback Machine, and it's preserved as it was that day, including all the links and everything, okay? I use this all the time. I personally have saved the MNGOP website, I mean a lot, okay? So you can go to the Wayback Machine and look at the MNGOP website, and you can still today download exactly the forms that were available at Precinct Caucus Day, okay? This form, I literally did it yesterday. This one, I printed 200 copies of that to bring here for people who are delegates. If any of you are going to be banned, you should fill that out. That's the form. Everybody would have signed that. Everybody would have signed that. So this form, they're not going to sign. So that's the difference here. This one just signifying. General agreement with the principles. This is the one that you have to meet the requirements, which includes you're going to support everybody and you're going to do everything and whatever, okay? So that's the problem there. And they have this. This is their thing that you have to support everybody in the bylaws, right, that they put in there. So people were worried about signing that, right? And that, what I've been told is this right here formed the basis because people crossed it out. And they're saying, well, if you cross that out, it means you don't agree with the parties. I agree with the principles of the Republican Party. Now this is you agree with them. There's no generally agree. There's you agree. You see the difference here? Don't you think everybody should have been able to sign the same form? Who here thinks that the people who didn't sign this form should have the right now to sign this form and be included if they do that? Does anybody think that should be?
Absolutely.
Every one of you should call Tammy, or no, what's her name? Who's doing it? What's her name? Tiffany. You can call Tiffany. Because Tiffany is the sole adjudicator of this issue, just so you know. Tiffany is running the appeal process for the 62 people.
For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Rich Myron, and I'm chair of the Compton Township precinct as it right now. What happened on the election night was this form here shows some discrepancies between what the caucus results were. They were posted online as they normally are, and somebody was smart enough to glean all that stuff off the internet before they took them down again for our county. I don't know where the data came from. I was just given this to use at the, I'll get to that in a future slide in a different meeting. But as you can see, from what we could gather and from what the official forums were on the internet, there was a 95.5% agreement between what was posted online and what we knew from caucus night. And despite that, the caucus was declared null and void, even though there was such a huge agreement between those two things. And let's see. And then on April 1st, there was a secret meeting. It was officially dubbed the Select Committee meeting. It was held at Thumper Pond in the conference room upstairs. And the purpose of the meeting was to determine the delegate status from the caucus. They hauled in all the documentation from the caucuses in 2 big plastic totes, and we were supposed to go through, I was part of the secret meeting, I was one of the 2 representatives from Otter Tail County. The rest of them, there was like 9 other ones there from the executive committee and so forth and so on. They even had their lawyer there to refute anything that we had to say. But the purpose was to go through all that documentation and see who was delegates, who were alternates. We were there for 4 hours and we didn't crack open a single packet. There was just 2, they had it in their mind what they wanted to do already. There were a couple people that didn't want to go with what Anna Matthews, the executive director at the time, came up with a guideline for accepting each and every delegate or alternate. But it was brought up by several people there that if we went, why are we holding Otter Tail County to such a high standard when if we did that to all the counties, nobody would be certified as delegate or alternate based on these guidelines. So there was arguments back and forth on what to do, and when I heard all the conversations, it was already predetermined what they were going to do. They were going to have no endorsing convention and use the 2022 delegates and alternates. And their terms actually expired caucus night of 2024, so I don't know why they could use those people anyway. Then from there, there were, I have some notes here. Vance Bachman was one of the attendees at the secret meeting, and he said right out front, in front of everyone, that he doesn't have to accept anything he doesn't want to, because he's independent of the NMN GOP, so he doesn't have to accept anything other than what he wants. And so the consensus was from everybody else that they do this, and Bachman agreed to it, so that's why they went with it.
So what?
So, and then it's up to the BPOU convention.
So, after hand canceled our 2024 convention, the state executive caught wind of that, and they said, we need to have a meeting of that. You can't do that unilaterally. So they formed this committee after they had their own thing, but it was kind of a sham show. Rich was invited, and another guy was invited from Otter Tail County Grassroots. So anyway, they end up coming up with a recommendation, and they gave it to Otter Tail County. But consider this, it's only a recommendation. They don't have authority in the issue. So they took the recommendations and they threw them in the garbage, and they did what they pleased anyway. So they didn't have a convention. So our Constitution, Otter Tail County, says the governance belongs to the body of delegates who were elected at their most recent precinct caucuses. So we, the majority, decided we're going to have a convention. So on April 13th, we held a convention right here in this room. And we elected new delegates, we changed the Constitution, we did everything by the book. And after we held our convention, they wouldn't recognize us. They didn't recognize the work that we did. So what we ended up doing, they were going to use the 2022 delegates at the next level, which is CD7, Congressional District 7. And so we went there, and we had several people from across the state fighting with us because we weren't allowed to go into the room. So they were making motions to seat the actual duly elected 2024 delegates and remove the 2022 delegates. But anyway, they took a voice vote, and we would have had the number. But then Anna Matthews, the executive director of NMN GOP, stood up and threatened that that convention would be called null and void if we went forward and we took this vote. And also the parliamentarian threatened to cancel the CD7 convention if we took this vote. Is that legal, guys, to do that?
I mean, no, there's no, absolutely no authority for anybody. These conventions are required under our Constitution, and we are required to comply with our Constitution. And the chair has to certify he did it. And this meeting, and I know I sent you, Rich, the breakdown of, there's a whole process going through from beginning to end about why it was legal to have a convention last year. The powers that be didn't appreciate that because they didn't want there to be a convention. It would have shifted the power for sure in the endorsement. It would have absolutely affected it. So they did that on purpose. I mean, I think nobody can really argue why this is all happening. It's about who has power, right? That's what it's about. People who have it don't want to let it go. They don't want to lose their power. But yeah, there can be nothing. And I think maybe pulling of that resolution to seat those delegates, it probably was good that it happened because it absolutely showed. The Republican Party of Minnesota was literally willing to shut down an entire congressional district convention to protect that process of the endorsement. Just think about that. They were willing to shut down 1/8 of the state in the party to control that outcome.
And then after the convention, I was doing some looking, and in the first sentence of the convention call for CD7 says, the 7th Congressional District Convention shall be composed of the delegates and alternates elected at the 2024 BPOU conventions, designated as lying within the boundaries of the congressional district. And there's the screenshot of the convention call. I have the first sentence circled there, and I emailed the whole, at the time, executive committee, and told them that that convention should be invalidated. And Tim Miller it was the only one who responded, said there were no endorsement. What are you looking for? Are you looking for another convention? Endorsing conventions are not required. And then I appreciate your discontent. It's valid. So he goes through and he virtually admits that they violated their convention call. And my question to you guys, isn't the convention call on the same standing as the Constitution?
So a convention call is required to be sent. There are very specific rules about how that convention call gets sent out. And the convention call, the rules of what's in it are required under sometimes bylaws, sometimes the Constitution. But that call should reflect what's required. And actually, by saying the 2024 delegates, that's 100% correct, right? So that the MNGOP, Constitution, state law, everything points to the fact that once those precinct caucus delegates are elected and once they are certified, they are real. They are real, and there is no right of anybody to not include them. And so there are no 2022 delegates once 2024 delegates are certified, which is why the certification matters, right? Because that's a person with authority saying, this is the person. Now, if they don't show up at a convention, then they won't be seated. That's the dude, and then an alternate might be seated in their place, right? That's why we have that process. But the delegate, once certified, has the right to show up at any BPOU convention for 2 years. They might not go to the first one, but they can go to the second one. Because once you're the delegate, until somebody else becomes a delegate in 2 years, you retain that right. Does that make sense, everybody?
So on May 17th of last year, we moved up to the next level, and that was the state convention. Now at the state convention, the MNGOP, they appointed a chair and a parliamentarian, and not just anybody, they wanted somebody who would control the meeting. Now, I don't know if you guys realize this, but at any convention, the people seated out here are the authority. They should control what goes on, but these guys wouldn't let it happen. So there was motions made by people on our behalf to seat the 2024 delegates again and remove the illegal 2022 delegates. Like I said, they acted as tyrants. Motions were made, they ignored them, they shut off microphones, and they would not let a vote. They let a couple people speak on behalf of Otter Tail Grassroots, and they allowed Tiffany Lymaster and Vance Bachman to also speak on it. Well, they were not convincing all. Everybody could tell they were lying, where our side, when they spoke, they told everybody in attendance what happened. So the people in the audience were grumbling and they were ready to vote on our behalf, but the tyrants wouldn't let a vote go forward as to who's a seat. So I want you, Brett, you were on the floor, you were making motion stuff. You want to address some of this stuff?
Yeah, sure. So we had prepared a couple of nights and a couple of weeks before this. We had 30 different motions that we were going to make. We had a parade. Everybody was handed, this is your script. So I ran those meetings, and of the 30 motions that we had, they only allowed 9. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, they acted like tyrants. They wouldn't let things go by that should have been done. So on August 21st, 2024, an email was sent out by five of the delegates who were elected last year at our convention, and in this letter, we were addressing a BPOU meeting that was sent out by the former chair. Well, I guess he's still the chair, even though he wasn't elected as a delegate at his last convention. But anyway, they sent out a call for a meeting, just a BPOU meeting, not any convention or anything like that. And so 5 of us signed a letter sending out to all the delegates saying this is an illegitimate meeting because these people's term was done in 2022. So evidently they didn't like that because they still think they're the legitimate one. So a few months later, on October 8th, 2024, MNGOP lawyers sends a cease and desist letter to the 5 of us who signed that. What do you think about this letter, guys? Is that?
I mean, all they do with these letters from, and Reed LeBeau is the attorney that took the first position way back in 2022, right? So he's the lawyer, and Tammy Berry, contacted me back in 2022, right at the first time there was a concern about what was going on at Otter Tail, and I drafted, I think, like a 19-page breakdown, a fact check document. If any of you want that, I think Rich has it, he can get it to you. That goes through exactly point by point why the information in Reed LeBeau's letter was wrong. And I think, it's like, you all, how many of you have kids? Any of you, right? You have kids? And so, like once they tell you something, then the story can grow, right? Because you catch them and then it's like, we just keep getting, they just go deeper, right? That's kind of what I think has happened in the party. Some decisions were made a long time ago, a couple of years ago, where they did some things incorrectly, and rather than just fess up, right, they just kept digging the hole deeper and broader and, doubling down. And I was told today by somebody on the state executive board that we should all just blame the former ED, like she did a lot of it, right? And I'm just going to say to you, she did some things wrong, but she also took a lot of orders. So we can blame the person that we see, but we really do need to be asking the question, who do they work for and why are they doing it? Does that make sense? Because these things, all the things you're talking about, didn't just happen. This guy, Reed LeBeau, he's not getting paid by an ED. Do you understand? He's getting paid by somebody to come up with these arguments to shut all you down, right? Do y'all understand that? The Republican Party might be broke, but we've paid a lot of money to attorneys to do a lot of terrible things. Not to attack Democrats, not to file litigation against the Secretary of State, but specifically to come up with arguments to shut down the foundation of our entire party. And if you think that makes sense, then I'd love to have coffee with you, and maybe you could try to convince me.
So 2 months ago, December 30th, just before the new year, well, let me start out with this. They had a state central delegate meeting convention in December, and they elected a new chair. David Hand got defeated, and Alex Plekish took his place. Well, David Hand, on his way out the door, first, the orders came let's start over. Vance Bachman and the Otter Tail County Executive Committee sent a letter to David Hand telling him not to recertify Otter Tail County BPOU. In other words, get rid of it, just do away with it. They don't have anybody left hardly on their side because people are getting tired of the corruption. So on their way out the door, rather than hand it over to people who actually want to do good, they want to destroy it. So they asked David Hand to not recertify Otter Tail County, just get rid of it. What do you guys think of that? Have any thoughts?
Well, he doesn't have the authority to get rid of a BPOU. I mean, he can shut down, correct me if I'm wrong, he can shut down their ability to donate money to candidates, but he can't say you no longer exist, correct?
So the precinct caucus forms the foundation of the Republican Party, right? We've talked about that, and there's 4,000 approximately precincts in the state of Minnesota. And then there are these determined by a very big committee of redistricting. They constantly are, every 10 years, right, they redo the boundaries, and so the BPOUs and the congressional districts get realigned, right? But the truth is, for a major party, once you hold precinct caucuses and there are people elected, those delegates form the precincts which form the BPOUs, and there's no way to get rid of them. So when they talk about decertifying or separating, you have to go to a different level. They can't actually get rid of it. Now, if you're a brand new major party, let's say like you were the Legal Marijuana Now Party, or you were the Green Party, or whatever, and you're just beginning to form, like you're at the beginning, does everybody agree that there's no way that a brand new major party would have a complete structure in every single precinct in the state? Can we agree that's not possible? So in order to be a major party, you don't have to have it in every single one. But what you do have to have is you have to have a precinct caucus that everybody can go to. So maybe, I think now you have to have 45 BPOUs now, I think, or something like that in the state. But what it would be is that, let's say you have one in Detroit Lakes, well then people would be assigned where they could go there. So they'd be represented. Does that make sense? And then the expectation is that as you grow your party, you would expand your formal BPOUs, which then if they raise more than $750, those BPOUs would have to attach to the campaign finance board. Does that make sense? But what we do know is if you don't raise money and you don't spend money for things outside of organizing your BPOU, you don't have to file with the campaign finance board. It's not required. What David Hand tried to do is say that he has the right to not recognize a BPOU as existing. What he does have the right to do is say to the campaign finance board, we're not going to affiliate financially with those people, right? So there is some confusion that I know Alex Pluckish, people have said that he told them not to do it. The Secretary of State's office did not decertify, and they wouldn't have decertified because they don't have the authority to do it, and David Hand didn't have the authority to demand it not be done. He was leaving anyways, right? So the point is, a BPOU exists as soon as there's even one precinct caucus that elected delegates, because that's in our Constitution and the law. Does that make sense to you? They exist, right? They just exist.
So in other words, the crew that's currently the executive committee and the chair, Vance Bachman, if they can't control it, we don't want one. We'll just get rid of it. That was their intention. So now we're up to the present day. So Plekish has been working with some of the executives of the state and CD7 attempting to try and get a BPOU convention because the BPOU, Otter Tail County's BPOU executive committee won't call one. So right now it's in the works. It's being planned for March 8th, coming up a convention. But they wanted to work out a compromise. What they're doing is not allowing the 2024s to go forward after the convention, but the 2022s will be seated again at the congressional district, and those same executive committees will be in office for another year. Now the compromise is they're going to allow for state central delegates and for the officers to be reelected. It's a compromise with corrupt individuals. They still are hanging on to power. They're like I said, they're like bullies. It's like at the foundation of our country, the first two presidents paid ransoms for Muslims were capturing our ships over in the Middle East, and they were paying these ransoms in order to get our our freed prisoner back. Well, then we got a Navy, and Thomas Jefferson was in charge, and they stopped doing that. They stopped cooperating with the bullies. We can't cooperate with bullies, with corrupt individuals. We are the rightful delegates for 2024. We showed up at our caucus. We did everything right. We did everything legal. We had a convention. We are the rightful, legitimate delegates, not these corrupt individuals. Yet they're still trying to control everything. So that March 8th convention, they're withholding 62 delegates. And it's all about this form, which this form is irrelevant. They created this illegitimate form, and now anybody who crossed things out, anybody who wrote under duress, anybody who wouldn't sign their form, they're not going to allow. So they're whittling it down. 62 people can't go to the convention supposedly. Now there's an appeal process, but Tiffany Limaster, she's the deputy chair of the CD7. She's going to be the one that's doing the appeals. So she's going to try and keep out as many people as they want. That way they figure that they can have the majority and control the convention. So what are you guys' thoughts on the upcoming convention, the CD7, and the deal they worked out, the compromise? What do you think of the compromise?
So, I want to ask you guys a question, okay? So, the Constitution, the statute, the constitutions of the party, and the BPOUs are all pretty consistent about this. That once delegates are elected in the even year, they serve for 2 years until the replacements are elected. That's just the language. Is that clear language to you? Okay, so here's the critical thing to think, because we spend a lot of time playing checkers, but we have to actually do some critical thinking here, which I know our government doesn't like us to do anymore. Well, Trump does want us to do it actually, but you know what I'm saying? We've kind of been taught to just not question. So if in fact, remember I showed you this binder, the law says certification. The chair certifies. Now you're a delegate. So I have right here this binder, and you all can look at it. Okay? You all can feel free to look. There are affidavits from chairs of 59 precincts in Otter Tail that I personally worked with these guys to make sure we had. Okay? So there can be zero question that people are certified under the law. Okay? There's an affidavit under penalty of perjury in here. Okay? 59. Do you think then that that's valid? That there's 59 certified? The chair certified them as required in the law. They're certified. Does that make sense? So if once the delegates are elected and certified from the even year, which would be 2024, and their replacement, they are replacing the people from 2022, once they're certified, are there 2022 delegates anymore that can serve? Do you understand? I mean, I want to be sure we all get this, okay? There's no such thing as a 2022 delegate anymore in Otter Tail. Because, anywhere, but nobody else is talking about this. People say, well, other people did things wrong. Well, but nobody cares in other places. We care in Otter Tail. Why do we care in Otter Tail? Because if the Otter Tail delegates are properly seated at the BPOU convention and they hold elections, and they hold elections to fill vacancies that were not filled in the even year, which would be the CD delegates, right? I believe it's very possible that the power of who controls CD7 will flip away from the people that are currently there to people who are now challenging those people. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. But we 100% know that if we don't seat the Otter Tail people, nothing's changing for 2 years. And those people will then control the organization of the precinct caucuses next year, right? Which will then affect the next 2 years. And if these rules stand, that this is what they get to do, what's going to happen next year? What do you think? So this is a chance for people to do the right thing and fix the problem. Or maybe people think I'm crazy and you read LeBeau's explanation. And by the way, this is America still. People do have the right to make those decisions. I'm just saying to you, read the law, read the constitutions, read the bylaws, and then make a decision, and then make some phone calls to people. Send some emails. Because this isn't just, people will say all across I go all over the state, right? People will say, why do we care about this? This is Otter Tail's problem. Well, guess what? If they can do it in Otter Tail, where else can they do it? they can do it everywhere. And if they can do it in Otter Tail and it stands, they will start to do it everywhere.
I'm running for chair of CD7, so we can change this. The list that they sent me from Otter Tail is the 2022 delegates. So just know that they've already decided.
Right.
So a compliance committee with teeth should be solving these problems, right? Holding people accountable and educating people. How many of you learned anything today? Did you learn anything today? So don't you think that people should be, I mean, people don't know that they don't know something. And how many of you historically, until recently, until the last, let's say 8 years, actually thought you could trust the people that were running? If they're running as a Republican, that's what I'm going to vote for, right? They're good people. You know, they're not necessarily Democrats. They're just profiteers, right? So we can fix this. We just got to show up, right? It's our country. It's our state. It's, you know, this is your BPOU. Just know that I live in Ilhan Omar's district. So just letting you know. You think you got problems. I mean, I'm telling you. So
I just want to say this quick first, that I was one of those people that voted in November for quite a while. If you think you're doing your civic duty by showing up in November, you're too late. Somebody else has put those two candidates on the ballot. If you don't get involved early, if you don't get involved with the caucus process before they try and take it away because they want to silence the little people and let the people with the money pick your candidates, you're too late. People always say, oh, why should I even vote? They're both the same. You're right. They're both the same. So you have to get good candidates elected at the precinct caucus level, become delegates, go on to the congressional district and vote for the right candidates. Know your candidates. Just because they say, I'm Republican, I'm conservative, I'm pro-Second Amendment, I'm pro-life, means nothing. Those are issues that they go back and forth on, but the real thing is the stealing of our money. That's what they're after. So you have to get good, honest people running for office.
So I have a slate of people from around the CD. I don't know if they particularly want to say where they're associated or not yet, but so yeah, so Jason, state representative. Right now we have Mandy Heffron, who was appointed, Mandy Heffron.
And works for who?
And works for Michelle Fischbach, just like our chair.
who created the forums?
Right, right, she created the forums. Anyway, so I'm about solutions. But so the list, if you're running and if you haven't got your list yet, you need to get your list. We need to compare them because they sent me the list, and like I said, the 2022 Otter Tail delegates are on there, and there's only delegates and alternates together is 36, and that's what your delegate number allocation is. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but it doesn't sound good.
How many should it be?
It should be 36 and 72, right?
We should have 37 because it went from 35 to 37 last year.
Okay.
In 22 we had 35 and now we have
Yeah.
37.
That's just delegates alone.
No.
Delegates alone, yeah.
Yeah, just delegates, right? Yep. Anyway, so like they said, you can flip a whole election with just Otter Tail. So, a couple of the constitutions, I'm working with some people, Constitution Committee, we have to stop electing or having paid staffers as BPOU officers. So that has to change. Yeah, CD7, it's at the state, it's everywhere. So all the convention I was at earlier today, I was up in Hubbard County. You know, we're all making those changes here, at least in my Senate district. So we're making that stuff happen. So anyway, so the solutions part. So we got Moorhead, right? One Senate district and one House district that are blue in the whole CD. So what I want to do is take every county that's north of 210, which would be north of you guys, right? That they would converge on Moorhead and we could flip those two seats. The other southern 2/3, which includes you guys, myself, Todd County, that we would adopt a BPOU where we know that a Republican would have a good chance to win. So Sueck over in St. Cloud, Caleb Steffenhagen down in Carver County, this tab key race where they threw away ballots and all that, we can win that race. So my thing is that we would adopt a BPOU because we're comfortable here, right? We're 72 to 76% Republican, but we're not gonna change anything unless we get involved in other places. Otherwise, nothing will change in the state. We gotta flip it all. So that's my goal, is we gotta focus on 2026, and we have to do the precinct strategy. If you're not familiar with that, look that up, but it's about talking to your neighbors. So like in my BPOU, I have 10 vice chairs and I have 40 precincts. Each one of them gets 4. Go talk to your neighbors. That's what it's about. That, and if you don't know what to break the ice with, well, ask them about the, how's the school board? You know, everybody's talking about DEI and all that stuff. They're gonna lose all their money, because Minnesota's not gonna pay attention. So that's the, to get elected. We have some constitutional changes. Like I said, we have to do the, get rid of those people who are, how do you want to say it? We shouldn't have paid staffers working as BPOU officers. It's really that simple. But there's other stuff too that needs to change. Our constitutions, Susan and I have been talking about some things that have to change, not just at our level, but at the state party as well. So, I guess that's it. We need a change. And if we don't do anything about it, it'll never change. So we got solutions. I got a team. We're having a Zoom meeting tomorrow night. I'm up to 24 people on the team. So, and at least half of those are in positions where they're vice chair or whatever. So we got a slate that we're running on. It's about flipping everything at CD7. Everybody's got to go. So that's what I need to do.
Hello, fellow patriots and truth seekers. It's been over 2 weeks now since we've had our big reveal meeting. Today is March 9th. Just wanted to give a few updates. Since that meeting, the CD7 executive board had agreed with the state executive board to have a convention, and but they were notifying 62 people that they were not going to be invited or get the call because of infractions that they thought deemed worthy of not being able to be seated. 5 of those denials were because we had gotten cease and desist letters from David Hand, the former chair of the Republican Party's lawyer, and that was not part of the agreement. It was only supposed to pertain to the registration form. But besides us 5, there was 57 others, I believe, who were told they would not be able to go because of this faulty registration form, illegal registration form that was not prescribed by the MNGOP State Executive Committee, and it was not uniform with the rest of the county. So as far as I know, there was an appeals process, but as far as I know, no one who got the letter saying they wouldn't be invited won their appeals. Now, there may have been, but I have not heard of any of them. The main objective of them is to stay in power. So they will lie, cheat, and steal, whatever they have to do to keep people from participating in this convention. Also, they will probably try and seat people who did not get elected at their precincts. For one, would be Vance Bachman, who is the current BPOU chair. He did not attend his caucus. He did fill out an absentee application, but it was the people at his precinct decided not to nominate him nor vote for him, so he is not a 2024 delegate. So they then canceled. They scheduled a convention for March 8th, but since then it was canceled. They said, from what I heard, they couldn't find a venue, but the venue in which they had in 2023 and the venue that they now scheduled the March 22nd venue convention for, that venue was available on the week of March 8th, but for some reason they didn't take it, so that was just an excuse to not have it. Another excuse they had is they didn't have a committee set up to take constitutional proposals. They probably should have been able, they had plenty of time to do that. They probably don't have enough people to do that because people from the establishment in Otter Tail County are jumping ship faster than rats off the Titanic. So there was just a couple excuses why they did that. Now, they want to operate this convention. I'm sure they're going to try, like I said, they're going to try and eliminate people from participating. They're going to add people who are friendlies to the list. They'll also probably appoint a chair and a parliamentarian to run roughshod over the convention. They may even cancel the convention. You never know with these people beforehand, so they're up to all kinds of tricks. There's a couple things that I wanted to add that we didn't, there were some of the things that we discussed at our meeting a couple weeks ago. One of the things that was in 2023 when they suspended 33 duly elected delegates, there was 4 counties in our Senate District 9. There's a total of 5 with Otter Tail. There's Douglas, Grant, Traverse, and Wilkin. All 4 of those BPOUs passed resolutions to condemn the actions of Otter Tail, the Otter Tail BPOU. It says this. It says a resolution condemning the actions of Otter Tail County Republican Party leadership by unconstitutionally refusing to seat duly elected delegates and alternates. Whereas the Minnesota State Republican Party and each county Republican Party has a constitutional governing how each entity is to operate. Whereas the Republican Party stands for the rule of law, due process for all citizens, upholding the sanctity of the election process. Whereas when a person is duly elected by his or her fellow citizens at a biennial caucus to represent them as either a delegate or alternate at future Republican Party conventions, this Constitution an important part of our Republican form of government. Whereas any attempt to unduly interfere with the functions of a delegate or an alternate in violation of the state or county Republican Party constitution is a serious breach of protocol and destroys trust in the Republican Party. Whereas refusing to seat a duly elected delegate or alternate at a Republican Party convention in direct violation of the state or county Republican constitution, such a serious breach. Whereas the actions of the Otter Tail County Republican Party leadership at their county convention on February 11, 2023, wherein the leadership determined in advance of the convention to not only refuse to allow certain duly elected delegates and alternates to be seated, but to refuse to even allow them to attend the county convention in direct violation of the Otter Tail County Republican Party Constitution duly adopted in 2021, was a serious breach of protocol and destroyed trust in the Otter Tail County Republican Party. Whereas it is an inexcusable act to refuse to seat duly elected delegates and alternates without affording said delegates and alternates due process to know what they did to justify being treated in such an unbecoming manner, and allow them to defend themselves before any negative action was taken against them. Whereas said shameful and authoritarian action by the Otter Tail County Republican Party leadership has no place in the Republican Party and ought to be condemned by every freedom-loving citizen, regardless of their political affiliation. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Douglas County Republican Party as follows. The Douglas County Republican Party condemns in the strongest possible terms the action of the Otter Tail County Republican Party leadership in designing to refuse to seat certain delegates and alternates, or even let them enter the convention on February 11th, 2023, in direct violation of the Otter Tail County Republican Party Constitution and without affording them the process to know allegations against them and afford them the opportunity to defend themselves. So like I said, this was passed by our four other counties in Senate District 9 to condemn Otter Tail County actions. So there's a lot of rumors going on that we're just a ragtag bunch of people who are disgruntled, who are angry and upset because we lost an election. That's not the case at all. We are the vast majority in Otter Tail County in the Republican Party. It's a handful of nefarious, corrupt people who are doing things that are illegal, which is said by basically by our surrounding counties, telling that happens to be the case. So not only was it them, but other counties across the state of Minnesota have condemned their action since. So another thing that happened was in 2024, after our caucus was considered null and void, and they planned on canceling a county convention, our two representatives from Otter Tail County, our state representatives, Tom Murphy and Jeff Backer, they wrote letters condemning the actions and demanding that we be seated. They said as follows: reinstate all 2024 Otter Tail County delegates and alternates from Representative Murphy and Representative Backer, March 18th, 2024, to Chair Han, Deputy Chair Bergstrom, Executive Director Matthews, and members of the Minnesota GOP Executive Board. On February 27, 2024, grassroots conservatives overwhelmed the Otter Tail County caucuses, outnumbering other attendees by a margin of almost 5-1. Acting on the advice of senior party members, these members worked hard and followed the political process. They attended the 2024 caucus with the goal of effecting change within the county organization, a change they hope would restore truth and transparency, revitalize grassroots participation in the county operations, and protect the sovereign election rights of the people. These good folks showed up to support Republicans locally and statewide. It is paramount that the party prioritize the decision of precinct caucus voters in the weeks since the caucus. These members have watched in alarm as many party officials at the local, district, and state levels have worked to nullify Otter Tail County's caucus results, and in so doing overturn the representative decisions of Otter Tail County's caucus electorate. These are not the actions of a party founded upon the hallowed principles of liberty and justice for all. They are perceived as the actions of an organization intent on disregarding the will of the precinct voters. Now, besides, there's a lot more to this letter, but besides these two, there's other representatives in the state of Minnesota who have written in support of Otter Tail County as well as other BPOUs and other congressional districts in support of Otter Tail County. Everyone knows that the Otter Tail County leadership has been corrupt over the last 3 years, doing everything within their power to stay in power, even though they're vastly outnumbered. But anyway, these are just a few of the updates and a couple of things that we had forgot to mention a couple weeks ago. Anyway, continue the good fight of faith, Patriots. We will see you down the road. Thank you.